Okay, it looks like we are live and ready to go. So we'll wait a few minutes to let folks join. As a reminder, if you have any questions, make sure to put it into the chat.
Hello.
Hello.
I don't know why it does that. It gives me this sit tight, sit tight, sit tight, and I have to back out and come back in, and then it works.
I did the same thing this time too, so it must be a Google thing. So it looks like the chat should be working, but it doesn't look like I can type, so I'm going to try this again.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see anything at all in the box. It's there, but there's no content. I see, let's try this. But that's it.
All right, well, today's agenda is going to be talking about some of the continued fallout from the review decision and going over a few of our recent issues that have come up and any questions that you guys might have. And please do let us know if you're not able to post a note. This should have some sort of chat for you guys to post a note, but it doesn't seem to be working quite the same as it did last week. So feel free to just let us know if you can see or not, and we'll go from there. Okay, so Kelly, I know this week we did a little bit more kind of more updates from Amazon this week on the review situation. We were actually just talking about this today. The very serious kind of "you bad person" kind of emails coming from Amazon. Can you elaborate a bit on that and what you're seeing come from Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone thought that the fallout was over, I think you are sorely mistaken. There's a lot more coming. And I think we touched upon this a little bit last time, but whenever Amazon makes an announcement about a change to a policy, you will never see them say, and we're going to do XYZ to enforce said policy. They're going to do it. They're just not going to tell you that they're doing it, and they are. I saw a message today that was received by a seller this week that basically said, we know that you've been manipulating reviews. We know that there are certain data points that are involved, and we expect you to divulge exactly how you've been doing this. And if you fail to answer our questions honestly, we will not restore your selling privileges, and in fact, you will be gone forever. So they're very much taking a hardline stance. They're wanting to know how you have done this this manipulation of reviews, and they expect you to basically reveal any technique, source, person, connection that you were using to do that. And failure to provide that information will result in permanent loss of your selling privileges. They're not playing. End of story. I fully expect that however many people have received these messages are probably struggling very hard to provide enough information to be reinstated.
So when you're saying providing enough information, the thing that we saw in the email, we saw every single prohibited review. We saw every single source that you got from the review, not just the companies, but it seemed like they're actually referring to the people too. So
yeah.
That's a lot of data. I mean, how would you even go about providing that? I mean, the only thing I can think of is like Excel or something.
Right. Well, and that's a good question. I think it depends on how people were violating the terms of service. So if you were using an external company that advertised itself as being able to get you these really amazing reviews to boost your product, I think they're looking at what was the URL? Did you have a contact person at that place? What was the basis of your agreement with them? What did they promise you they would do? Would they give you 500 reviews in 3 months? I think they're looking for details of that. They're also looking at the angle if for sellers, and at least that's the impression that I got based on the writing, is that they're looking for people who may have used friends and family as well. people that they actually personally know in life, not just a business transaction, to do these reviews. So they're very much trying to figure out connections. And the other thing that was in the letter that I thought was really, really interesting was, in this particular instance, someone had appealed and answered the questions that they thought to their best of their ability, but Amazon said, your information doesn't match with the data that we have. We know that there are data points that are connecting you to more than what you're telling us. So unless you tell us, we're not going to reinstate you. That's a significant change from prior communication to sellers, but also in policy. Not just at these are our TOS about reviews, it's how do we talk to you about these violations. And so I definitely think there's going to be a bit of pressure applied to people who find themselves being suspended for this problem.
I think that's going to be a really tough thing for people to take care of. I mean, especially with anyone who's still using the review tool. So there was a thing that I saw on Facebook today, and we mentioned this actually last week due to a question that came in, about how people have basically been trained, the reviewers have been trained to do these, I got this at a discount, blah, blah, blah. And of course, if you do that now, they're looking for those phrases. They're looking for that to warn you. So even if you're using like Snagshot just completely changed their process. I just got an email from them today saying that they're doing like a monthly fee for however many active campaigns you have at a time. It's not the way it was before. It was like a certain price per snag or whatever. Now it's not per thing that you're selling. It's actually for the ability to run a campaign itself. And even then, the users of Snagshot are used to this particular process. So what would you see as the potential risk? I mean, I definitely see a risk to users.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. How do you quantify that risk? As the person who's trying to solicit the reviews, whether you're using Snagshout or any other service, I think that you are really taking on a lot of unknowns because you don't know what people are going to do. Once you release that product into the wild, you have no idea what's going to happen. And I see that Aziz has a question about the incentivized reviews, and I'll get to that in a second. But to your point, Rachel, I think the number one thing that you can do is make your content, especially if you are creating detail pages on Amazon, you're a private label seller, I think especially, you need to make your detail pages as good as possible. It's worth signing up for that A+ content. Make everything clear, concise, beautiful product shots. Make your product stand out on Amazon because that's what's going to get people to leave you reviews. They're going to be very curious about, this amazing detail page looks a lot like an Amazon detail page. They won't be able to tell the difference. If you're doing those things and you're asking buyers, without going overboard, to please review your products, and by overboard I mean don't email them weekly. Say, please review my product. But ask once, or if you have a conversation with a buyer about an issue you're resolving for them, if they have any kind of problem, ask. Those are appropriate things to do to build your reviews. As far as the incentivized reviews, all indications are that Amazon is going through and removing the old way of doing things with those reviews, which I find a curious sort of reaction, if you will, that had been allowed. The terms of service specifically stated that you must have buyers say that, and yet they're going in and removing all those. And I think the reason for that is that so many people were getting fake reviews that were using that language that Amazon could no longer be certain what was truly a review of a legitimate standing and what was not. And so rather than leave tainted data on the platform, they decided to remove it all.
And my understanding was that the word that they used when they did that public notification was the term excessive.
Yes.
Which seems like that gives them an enormous amount of latitude in deciding what is excessive and what's not.
Right. Well, and you have to imagine, too, that Amazon is looking at buyers who have contributed thousands of reviews and wondering, how did they get all those products to do that? Did they actually have all those products? So, yeah, there are probably a number of markers that they're reviewing that would lead them to say, okay, we need to remove all these incentivized reviews. So I think we're going to continue to see those drop off the website. Over time, the amount that drops off will be less because they will be cleaning them up. But yeah, for now, there's definitely going to be a mass exodus of reviews from the website.
Yeah, I've already seen a whole bunch of complaints about that, and some complaints from our own clients and from people who are in the Facebook forums. And it's just going to keep happening. What I suspect is that team probably doesn't have very many operations staff, and so they're just going through a queue.
Oh, I'm certain that there's more technology helping them too. So combine that with a small operations team that has limited amount of time and skill and all that stuff to do what they're doing with whatever new technology they've added into the mix. And yes, you're gonna see a massive change to the way reviews look on the website.
Which Agreed. I personally, I think this is a good thing, to be honest. There's another thing that they did where you can actually sort out all of the verified reviews. And I must admit, I hadn't seen that until I actually went on my mobile. And on mobile, it's a specific button, like right below the top 2, I think, featured reviews. Then it has one where it says all verified. So then that's going to be prioritized. So organic verified reviews are going to be prioritized, which is as it should be. That's what customers are looking for.
So I guess what our message is to those of you who are listening is do things within TOS, because playing outside the rules is eventually a losing game. They will find you, and they've already proven that they've enhanced their technology to do so. Don't risk it. Go with the A+ content if you can. And even if you can't, do everything you can to make your detail page as compliant as possible and as clear and concise as possible, because really the number one thing working against you is not necessarily your competition. It's the enormous cornucopia of bad data that is on the website. The catalog is a mess. You need to work against that as much as you can as a seller.
Yeah, and just to go along with that, the A+ content, we had someone ask recently whether A+ is even worth it. And Amazon's own data shows 3 to 10% increase in conversion rate. And that is huge. I mean, your goal is anywhere from 9 to 20% conversion. Anything higher than that is going to be pretty good. So an increase of 3 to 10% is straight to the bottom line, you know. And one of the things that I find interesting about this whole conversation is people seem to be focusing on the wrong metrics. So I keep hearing people say, well, if I can't do giveaways and I can't do reviews, then I won't be able to rank on page 1. Okay, but for which keywords? And if you're spending that much money to rank on page 1, are you getting good traffic? Are you getting garbage traffic? How are you converting? I mean, all the different things that make it to where you actually can make money on the website. People seem to be so focused on what my rank is for their specific, their top product name, that they're forgetting how to sell on Amazon. So I think it's a good thing as well, because it's going to make people a little bit more focused on how to do things. It's a little bit harder. It's definitely going to be harder, but at least it'll be done the right way, the way that customers will be happy to buy from you.
Rachel, Denise wants to know exactly what A+ content is. Do you want to give her a brief definition?
Yeah. So A+, it's kind of funny that they call it A+, because I have no idea where that term came from. That so much at Amazon was like that, where we'd all use this acronym or this phrase, and that people would be new, and they'd be like, "What does that even mean?" We'd be like, "I don't know, but it's this thing."
We know what it means. We just don't know what it means.
Yeah, exactly. So A+ is a term for enhanced marketing content. So if you go on to vendorexpress.amazon.com, you can scroll down to the very bottom of the page after it tries to tell you why it's so great to be a vendor. Ignore that part. Scroll down past all of that to the part where it says learn more, and there's like a clip of, it says like hero image, and then it's got a couple other things. Click on that, and that'll open a PDF that gives you an example of a product page that you can get A+ content for. When you sign up for Vendor Express, in some categories it's not available. So you can't do it for hazmat products, you can't do it for certain kinds of heavy bulky products, you can't do it for jewelry, clothing, and luggage and shoes, I think. But for pretty much all hard lines and consumables, you can do Vendor Express. And when you sign up for that, you get a certain number of free A+ pages. And right now, Amazon's running a special. I think it's 5 free ones right now. But basically, Vendor Express gets the light version of A+. The vendors, proper vendors who are big and give Amazon a lot more of their sales dollars than you do as a seller, they get beautiful A+ pages. If you ever want to see just an absolutely gorgeous A+ page, look at the KitchenAid standing mixer. And that's a gorgeous A+ page. It's really nice. The other one that's pretty good is Body Glide. So the Body Glide, whatever the chafing thing is. Anyway, they have a pretty good A+ page. My favorite listing that I always use as an example is the Amazon Basics portable Bluetooth speaker. And that one has an A+ page that's similar to what you can get as a Vendor Express vendor, where it's fairly simple. It doesn't have the big chart that some of the vendors can get. It's just basically a back and forth. It does have a chart, but you don't get that as a Vendor Express vendor. You just, that's the cool part, the best part actually. But you don't get that as a Vendor Express vendor. Only the proper vendors get that. But you do get the description of your company and like a little little pop-out thing, and then a picture and text, picture text. And the thing that's cool about that is it's just like if you were trying to advertise on your website. It's more like a website than it is a detail page. And that's part of the reason why it converts so well, because the features that make a detail page successful are a little bit different than what makes a web page successful. So you can get people to your listing with keywords and with sponsored ads, all the things that they teach you. But to convert, it needs to look more like a web page. And that's what A+ gets you. You can use images up at the top and video, and then down below the fold is where the A+ content shows, and that's where you can do detailed words, pictures, diagrams, charts, whatever. Part of the reason why I keep pushing A+ and signing up for Vendor Express if you can is because we've been seeing lifestyle images being rejected by Amazon, and that actually being considered a violation of terms of service in certain categories. And we certainly don't want to recommend anyone to use lifestyle images for their product that they're making and then have the listing be suspended or the account be suspended. There's a question about platinum search terms. Those are exactly the same as search terms, but for platinum sellers. And if you don't know if you're a platinum seller, then you probably aren't. Usually it's only reserved for those who make a certain amount. And Kelly, I don't know if you knew the difference, but there were the platinum, gold, and silver sellers who are basically managed sellers. So if you've never heard from a manager at Amazon, then you're probably not managed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, platinum search terms didn't come up a lot in seller performance, but there were a few rumblings here and there. And Carla wants to know why they're rejecting lifestyle images. That's a good question.
Yeah, if you can answer from the situation that happened last week, I can also tell you before Kelly gets into that example that this is happening for vendors too. So we've been seeing actually images being rejected from vendors as well. They're being forced into using A+.
Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing just based on the last few months of contacts with different clients that I've had that have had image related suspensions is that the primary issue seems to be around two things. One, the quality of the images is often not very good. So they're blurry, or the color contrast isn't right. The saturation isn't very good. And as a photographer, I notice these things and I go, ooh, it's not quite right. But there's that. But then there's also the issue of using models in the photographs that kind of seem to be displaying more than one product. So for instance, I had a client that was advertising an active wear type item. And he used this lovely, lovely shot of someone running on a trail. It looked like someone in Ireland. I thought, oh, this is so pretty. I love it. However, it looked like it featured the tracksuit that the model was wearing and not the actual product. And that seems to be a huge focus right now. I've seen several sellers that have gotten either warnings or suspensions even for this particular issue. And so what they're trying to do is really enforce the site level rules that say effectively, highlight your product. Don't put other things in there. Minimal amounts of propping, minimal amounts of anything that isn't your product. Now, for some things, that's going to be more difficult than others. If I'm doing my little phone here, that's pretty easy. But when you're dealing with something that somebody wears on a person, and that's not really an apparel item, but something you actually wear on your body, yeah, I can see why you would want to use a model, but you're not allowed to use mannequins, and you're not allowed to use people at the site level. And if your category does not specifically allow it, you're going to see issues. So they're cracking down on that. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the catalog being a mess. On one hand, very, very glad that they're taking action on this, because I know, Rachel, this drives you crazy too. When I go to look for a product and I can't find it because there's just a veritable sea of bad product data, duplicates, really incomplete detail pages, it's hard. But on the other hand, it's frustrating because sellers are seeing what everyone else is doing and thinking they can do that too. The good news is that those suspensions are usually pretty easy to correct. You have to go back and review the rules, review the seller university content. Figure out what exactly is wrong with your product. Images, 99% of the time, it's that you have more propping than you should, or it's not featuring the product close enough so that you're not getting a sense of what they're looking at. And then If you fix those, you're going to get back on the site because they're very much incentivized to get you back. This is not considered a, I don't know, varsity level violation, if you will. I mean, it's bad. They don't want you doing that, but it's not the same as some of the things. It's like selling counterfeit. What?
Review manipulation.
Review manipulation, varsity level violation. Absolutely. We don't want to do that. And Tyler, your question about, are we talking about just the main image? No, they're looking at everything. In the particular example I just recited, the primary image for this particular seller was in violation, but actually the one that they specifically called out in the suspension notice was the third image. So make of that what you will. They're looking at everything, in other words. And you said, what about all these terrible quality pictures where products? Oh, Photoshop. Yeah, they don't like that either.
What we've been seeing is the size of the product in relationship to the rest of the stuff. So the way it's usually written is that the product needs to take up 85% of the image, right? And that's normally the ones where they say the white background and the product needs to be 85%. That's a good rule of thumb for your lifestyle image too. If you're going to do a lifestyle image of a kitchen product, make sure it's up close where the product is front and center. And if you're doing like a garlic press, let's just use that. Then the garlic press should be, you know, say this much of it, and then you could have like a garlic bulb there on what's clearly a counter. And that seems like it would be okay for now. One of the ones that we saw rejected was for basically a topical cream type item. And it was rejected because it was basically a child playing outside and showing what the topical cream does. And that's obviously not going to work because you can't even see the cream. It's just trying to demonstrate the effectiveness of the product, and that was rejected.
Yeah. Carla, I am seeing more enforcement about what, I definitely, and I am seeing more enforcement about the photoshopping thing. I had a client a few months ago that had lots and lots of listings. We're talking thousands upon thousands, and they were suspended for that issue. And it was a massive cleanup for them. So when you're seeing those, there's two things that I would reiterate for sellers. Don't imitate that, number one, and report it. The reports contact form is easily available in Amazon. If you search help and just say report a violation, you'll find it. Definitely let Amazon know that those are out there because they're bad. They should go away.
As far as the photoshopping itself, I don't think there's any problem with that necessarily. They haven't said that. I'm sure if the quality itself, where you can't see the product, their main concern, like with 1,000 pixels thing, is where you can actually zoom in on it. So if you zoom in, then that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, Photoshop itself is not the issue. It's the fact that most people don't know how to use it. It's a very powerful tool, and if you're not sure what you're doing, you will get really substandard results, and you will get that graininess. You'll get that very obviously we've plastered two things that don't go together. Here's a picture of Hello Kitty and Godzilla. No. It just looks really bad and very discordant. So yeah, Photoshop itself is not the issue. It's the application of it.
Cool. So I did have another question that came up recently, and that was around the FBA warnings. And so someone was talking about getting warned for, there were a couple things that came up. One was getting warned for not labeling or stickering the items properly upon receipt. And the other was for shortages. And the question was, well, how does that affect the standing of my seller account?
That's a really good question. To get to the root of that, I need to give just a tiny bit of background. So traditionally speaking, Amazon has only really allowed seller performance to issue warnings to sellers. And the reason for that is that they wanted enforcement to seem very unified and very clear, so that you weren't getting a message here, a message here, a message here. Well, who do you answer to? That is why when you get issues with product quality, you're seeing seller performance as signature. It's actually a different team, but for the appearances of seeming like one, they use the signature block. However, with FBA is not an enforcement arm. The warnings that they send don't seem to have an adverse impact on your account the same way that one that seller performance or product quality would issue. However, I caution people not to treat them lightly. I think that they are a very good, what's the word? What's that phrase? It's kind of like you get that. Yeah, it's the canary in the coal mine where you're like, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. It's kind of that I'm getting a nice warning saying, hey, you've got an issue, before Amazon turns you into the nail and they become the hammer with seller performance. You don't want that. So the FBA warnings, in the sense of how does that impact my seller health, probably has minimal to no impact. If you don't act on them, though, I guarantee you that you're going to start seeing issues with product quality or seller performance, because something is happening if your hardline item, which typically should have a 2 to 3% return rate, is suddenly getting a 5% or 6%. So pay attention to those. Definitely canary in the coal mine. As far as the other one goes, I'm not as familiar with those, but I would imagine it's the same thing, because again, it's not coming from seller performance. However, that said, if FBA is experiencing a problem that they think you are driving, they very well may reach out to seller performance and say, this particular seller is doing this. They've not stopped. We've warned them. Suspend them. So again, canary, coal mine, don't ignore, take action based on what they're saying.
And the second one, especially the one where they were saying that the seller was basically
misrepresenting.
Misrepresenting the amount. But the other thing was that they were filing tickets for refunds. So that seems like some sort of manipulation involving.
Oh, yes.
That's something that Amazon will never look kindly on.
Yes. We have a throwback question to the image thing real quick. No, it is never okay to use images off the net or from your competitor's photo, because you don't have permission to do so, and you're violating the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Don't do that. If you want to use a stock photo that you see, you need to find out if it has attributable rights. There's the not Common Core, that's education. What is that called? The Common License. The Common License, you can check to see if an image is licensed to be used for commercial purposes very easily. Flickr has a huge database for that. But when in doubt, go to the person who's taken the image and ask for their permission. If you can't get it, they don't respond, take your own. It's not worth it, because you can be nailed for an infringement violation. Not a good thing.
So I would say that the other one that is commonly used is Pixabay. So Pixabay, and I actually have seen that on other websites where they offer like Creative Commons items, and you're like, I've totally seen that before.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And Rachel's right. Rachel's right, though. But Flickr, Pixabay, and there's hundreds of other ones that have copyright-free or virtually unrestricted images that you can use for anything. So if you find that product, they're great. But generally speaking, you are courting a serious amount of legal trouble if you use someone else's image. Amazon views infringement concerns as a very high priority violation. And if you get too many of those in a short period of time, you can be suspended.
So the next question I see is, what's the best way to get traction on a new product listing as a new seller? My recommendation there is actually to do what had been happening before, which is using external to Amazon traffic. So there's a lot fewer requirements on how you advertise on Google or Facebook. And obviously you need different kinds of advertising on each of those. A lot of Google ones are really just focused on problem solving, or keyword-based. Facebook, you want some good images. But having external traffic directed internally and trying to do those giveaways and get organic reviews going, what I was seeing is that the giveaway programs basically shortened the launch period by around 2 to 3 months. So that whole first ramp up period where you really had to just get traffic in and get people buying and have a good enough product that they wanted to review it, that whole process basically got cut out. And so what ended up happening is a lot of people with marginal or crap products would just pay for reviewers to review it, and they would either just not review it if it was less 3-star, just let you know personally, or they would give it a good review, because there's this the concept of confirmation bias, where you basically if you got it for free, maybe it's not confirmation bias, but the concept of you get it for free, you expect it to be at least somewhat better because it's free. People have a different experience with free products than they do with paid products. So they would automatically be rating it higher, just because, even if they think they're honest, just because they feel better about having gotten something for free or at a discount. So doing things now, I would say that the most important thing is make sure that your product is exactly as described. Make sure you're not giving it more quality or better anything than it actually is, because what you want is you want your customers to be happy with what they bought, and then provide a review. The other thing is, if you're going to go to Feedback Genius and ask for a review, I would highly recommend putting no more than 2 emails out. There was one company that sent out 3, and they actually weren't that bad, because the way that they did it was more like helpful information. And so then I was like, oh, actually, that's kind of useful because I was getting a craft project and a craft product, and they gave me a bunch of information on how to use it. And so in that case, I was actually kind of happy about it because it's the kind of thing I would look up on Pinterest anyway, and now they're giving it to me as part of this email. So that made sense. If you're going to email them, it needs to be not spammy. And part of the reason I say that is because now that the giveaways have been shut down, the next area where I see a potential problem is the spamming. Amazon already emails people twice for a particular product being ordered, and then if you have the app, they text you as well to let you know that it arrived. So they're already bugging you 3 times. And then if the seller, technically I think it's 6 times or something like that. And then if the seller is spamming too, people are going to get pretty annoyed. So I would say keep it to a minimum. Make sure your product is good. Make sure that you ask for a review in your insert. If you're a PL seller, always ask for a review in your insert. Put all of your effort into the insert into the product. They may not look at it, but it's going to be a lot less frustrating for customers than getting spammed like crazy. And then when you do email them, make sure that that is really useful. So you had mentioned loose leaf tea, and one of the only real association that I have with loose leaf tea is Chinese tea sets. And so from my experience, that's the only thing that, like, a story about how tea has evolved over the generations. There's something where it's engaging or interesting in some way to the customer. And then like some tips on how to store it or how long it's good for, something where you're actually providing some sort of content value to your customer, and give that happy like dopamine feeling where they're like, yeah, I did a good job ordering this product. This is cool. And then you ask them for a review. And for a PL seller who uses FBA, I wouldn't even bother asking for seller feedback. There's plenty of MFN sellers who ask for it, and then you get on that page where you have like a list of every single person you can give feedback to. So I wouldn't even bother asking for it. Also, you can remove nearly any feedback that gets given if you're an FBA seller, just the way that the feedback process works. So always use your efforts, your email efforts, to get product reviews.
Yeah, I think that's where content becomes king in this regard. It's no different than the A+ content. It has to be targeted. If you are just begging sellers, or excuse me, buyers for reviews for your product, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's really important to actually use your time, your few opportunities that you have to contact the buyer very useful. You have to be very targeted.
So there was a question that came in outside of the chat about using VPNs and if they will try to find your actual IP address. And the answer there, and I can't get into too many details because I used to work in fraud, so I actually know how this works, but they're not just looking at your IP address. Anyone who thinks they're only looking at IP address hasn't been paying attention to modern technology. Part of the reason why they know which review sites you visited is because there's cookies on your computer keeping track of all that. So if you're using the same computer to manage your Amazon account as you are anything else that you do for Amazon, then Amazon can track it. Even if you dump your cookies, they have other ways of attaching things to your computer. They'll let you know in the terms of service that nobody reads. And there's just a lot of things that Amazon is able to do to track you that a lot of people don't even think that they can do, because Amazon's fraud systems were set up to capture proper fraudsters, like people who are ripping off millions of dollars from Amazon each year. And you as a seller are never going to be more clever than these people. The only way I've ever seen anyone succeed at this is by having like multiple device setups in different locations, like literally physically separate. And that's the only thing I've ever seen, because that's the only thing that Amazon really can't track is you personally. So if it's done online, assume Amazon can track it.
Yep.
They're not going to go out of their way to find whoever the IP address is behind the VPN, because they don't have to.
Right. It's like focusing on the wrong thing. I get this question a lot about IPs. If you think that IP is the end-all be-all to how Amazon is connecting people, you are missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, IP, I usually just ignored IP when I was finding relations. IP was pretty much irrelevant because you'd have so many people who would log in from Starbucks, or like Comcast rotates IPs. So IPs are useless, really, from my perspective. The only time that IP was in any way useful was in law enforcement investigations, because that's what law enforcement uses, because they're kind of behind the ball on this.
Tiny bit, tiny bit.
So there's a question about UK listings being blocked. This is a pretty detailed question. We have gone a little bit over time. I would say that anytime you have intellectual property issues with Amazon, that you need to probably find a lawyer. That's been our experience in general, that depending on the situation, but in general, if there's an IP issue on Amazon, we found that it really helps to have a lawyer contact that infringement complaining, since a lot of people don't want to write Amazon and retract their complaint, but a nice little letter on legal letterhead sometimes helps.
I would agree. And if you're talking about patents versus trademark, which is not clear for me the way the question is phrased, if it's truly patent, you definitely need an IP attorney to get involved on that, because Amazon traditionally is more receptive to settle litigation on patents than they are actual trademark infringement. So in the water's muddy a little bit in those areas. There's some overlap, but definitely I echo Rachel's advice to the T. Get an intellectual property attorney involved. If a rights owner is not responding to you, that often can be the catalyst to move things along, because they really don't want any more trouble. And if you've retained an attorney, they know that you're serious. So definitely agree with that.
So the other thing that I want to say about retaining an attorney is I absolutely do not recommend having an attorney write to Amazon on your behalf, ever. Very, very bad idea. Amazon gets really ticked off. And the whole legal team was like, oh, why are they writing with their lawyer? So use the lawyer for the other company. Don't use the lawyer for Amazon.
Well, and the other thing is, where would you send it to Amazon? There are so many ways. They have made it very difficult for your attorney to get to the right person. So yes, your attorney is definitely going to be your guardian angel when it comes to dealing with the quote unquote rights owner that has alleged infringement, not with Amazon, but with the rights owner.
Awesome. All right, if there are any questions that we didn't answer, we are doing this once a week, and we really appreciate you guys joining. And if you happened to miss the recording and are watching this on the YouTube replay, then feel free to put a comment or a question in the comments below. Thank you guys so much.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye-bye. See you guys next week.